eventually, three men came to the forefront. These three men were Julius, Pompey, Crassus. Fine. Crassus was the richest man in Rome, extremely wealthy. Pompey was a very popular general. Julius had been born to a wealthy family. Now, I want to tell you right up front which one of these we want. Julius, we know of today as Julius Caesar. He was the one who eventually won. However, at first it didn't look like he was going to. Anyway, Pompey achieved popularity by going to Spain and helping to secure the conquest of Spain, and came back a hero. Rome wanted to expand to the east, so they sent Crassus out here to Syria to conquer what was left of the Seleucid Empire. The mission was successful except for one thing. Crassus was killed. So with Crassus out of the way, that left you might say, the whole fight between Julius Caesar and Pompey. Now, Julius Caesar, as a young man, he stood before a statue of Alexander the Great. And of course, the statue of Alexander was young because Alexander died young, and it said Julius Caesar just broke down in tears. And he said to the statue, "When you were as old as I was, you conquered the whole world, and here I am, I'm your age, and I have conquered nothing." And he just went all to pieces. Julius Caesar is a somewhat interesting character. I mean, he had his problems. I never mentioned this before, I'm going to mention it now. Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, and Socrates, all three of these men had one thing in common. They were all three epileptic. You can take that for whatever it's worth. It shows you that epileptic people can achieve very highly. My grandmother was epileptic, one of them. And in fact, epilepsy is somewhat close to me right now, as far as it's in my family. So anyway, three of them had the problem, and in those days they didn't have Depakote, they didn't have any of the medicines we have today. Julius Caesar might also have been paranoid. It was, well, I'll get to why in a minute, why we might think so. But anyway, he finally got himself an army and went and conquered Gaul. Gaul is today called France. So then it was called Gaul. I mean, after all, Pompey had conquered Spain and Gaul was close to Italy. So he went and conquered Gaul and sent a message back to Rome. And folk, if any of you know Latin better than I do, you're welcome to correct me on it. But the message consists of three words. We know Widow Wiki. Anybody can pronounce it better than I can. Basically, it was, I came, I saw, I conquered. Anyone?
It's very Vidi Vici.
What's that?
It's very Vidi Vici.
Very Vita Vici. Thank you, very Vita Vici. Okay. I get my Spanish and Latin. Well, actually, I never took Latin. I took Spanish. All right. I came, I saw, I conquered. Now, I had a student do a paper on Julius Caesar one time, and he had some things to say that you won't find very often if you read his biography. Nevertheless, I must say, when he went to Gaul as a subordinate, and he wanted to get to the top. So he allowed him to get to the top. He entered into a homosexual relationship with a commanding officer. And he sacrificed his honor someone to do that, because they had a saying in Rome that if you allowed yourself to be used as a female and you were a man, it was a real disgrace. But he was a younger man. He even allowed himself to be used as a woman in order to get the promotions he wanted. Now, okay, I don't want to harp on that subject much, but just to give you an example, folks, of what politics was like in the ancient world. the five good emperors got to their positions, by the way, the same way, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Again, this was ancient Roman politics. But then when the commanding general died, Julius Caesar was next in line. He took over, conquered Gaul. Then the Roman Senate became alarmed at his popularity. Crassus was dead. Pompey was like next in line. So the Roman Senate sent a letter to Julius Caesar. Abandon your army, come back to Rome and retire as a private citizen. That was an order from the Senate. Julius Caesar refused. He said, all right, that's what they want me to do. Got his men together and said, okay, men, we're going to march on Rome. I mean, it's a frightening thing to do. Rome was powerful. Hadn't been overcome in some 400 years. He crossed the rivers, and as he crossed the rivers, he had his men turn around, men, and burn all your bridges behind you. Which leads to the modern day saying, I'm burning my bridges, meaning I'm going forward with this project, I'm not going to turn back. He was telling his men, I see, men, the bridges that we crossed over are destroyed. So if we lose, we're all going to die because there's no place for you to run. So he'd burn all the bridges. He went on into Rome, engaged Pompey, defeated Pompey, and took over. And for all practical purposes, the Republic had ended. In 46 or so BCE, don't worry about the date, but 46 he had himself set up as dictator, and then 3 years later he declared himself dictator for life. But all at the same time he was telling his Roman citizens, hey, the Republic is still on. I did not destroy the Republic. Well, yes, he had, and the Republic was not still on. Well, once he had taken over, he made plans to build a whole lot of bridges. A whole lot of public works, bridges, theaters, temples. He was a very religious man. He studied the Great Pyramid. He had plans to conquer. His plans he did not live to carry out. In the meantime, now, he married Cleopatra. Cleopatra was the last of the Ptolemies. Now, I've already mentioned her. She was a member of the Ptolemies. Somehow, even in spite of the fact that she was a woman, she managed to outmaneuver her brother. I mean, once her father died, she outmaneuvered all of her brothers and worked her way up to the top and took over the throne of Egypt, took the title of Pharaoh, somewhat similar to what Hatshepsut had done. Then she married Julius Caesar. They had a son called Caesarion. The son did not live long. But anyway, their plans were for Egypt to be united and become part of the Roman Empire. So he entered in a marriage alliance with Cleopatra. Now, Julius Caesar studied the stars, and in the process he made a calendar. The calendar was called the Julian calendar, and it was to last almost 600 years. The calendar we use, the Julian calendar was the last calendar before we come to the one we use. The one we use is the Gregorian calendar, which was made by Pope Gregory. We will talk about Pope Gregory later. Don't worry about him now. But Pope Gregory was one of the bright spots in the Dark Ages. Pope Gregory made the calendar we use today. The problem with the Julian calendar that they didn't realize at the time was, all right, have you ever wondered why we have a leap year? When I was a kid, I had a teacher who didn't know. The reason is the Earth goes around the sun in 365 and almost a fourth days. It's 365 days and 5 hours plus a few minutes and a few seconds added that too. Well, if you ignore that fourth of a day, almost fourth of a day, in other words, you don't have a leap year. After 100 years, that's 4 days it's off your calendar. After 100 years, you're 4 days off. After 800 years, after 400 years, you're 16 days off. After 1,000 years, you're about 25 days off. Actually, it's worse than that. Let's see, after 100 days, it's 4 years. I mean, after 100 years, it's 4 days. Make a long story short, here's what would happen. You'd wind up having your fall equinox, not on September 22nd, like we did this year a couple days ago. You wind up having your fall equinox sometime in the summertime. And you'd be singing, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, while outside you were gardening and the sun would be 90 degrees hot. Your seeds and all get out of whack. The idea of having the solstice, of having the leap year, is to keep the solstices and equinoxes falling approximately the same day. Now, I mentioned the fall equinox. It used to occur on September 21st. It doesn't anymore, it won't for another 100 years. It now falls on September 22nd because the year 2000 was not a leap year. Now, you might say, well, why not? Here's why. The years at the end of a century are not leap years. In other words, the year 1600, which is divisible by 400, was a leap year, but 1700, 1800, 1900 were not leap years. The year 2000 was. The year 2100 will not be, if you live that long, any of you. The year 2200 will not be, 2300 will not be, 2400 will be. Every 400 years at the end of a century are leap years. If the year 2000 had not been a leap year, we would still be observing the fall equinox on September 21st. Eventually, the fall equinox will occur on September 21st again, but it'll be another 100 years from now. The calendar we have now is expected to last us 10,000 years, and somewhere down the road, 10,000 years from now, astronomers will have to add or subtract one day from the calendar. Julius Caesar named a month after himself, the month of July. Now, the next man after him, Caesar Augustus, decided he wanted to name a month after himself, so he named the month of August. But the problem was August only had 30 days under the Julian calendar, so Caesar Augustus chopped off a month from unlucky February to make his month as long as Julius Caesar's. Now, I say unlucky February, a lot of bad things have happened in August. The first atomic bombs and only atomic were dropped in August. Elvis Presley died in August. Among other bad things that have happened to us in August. So August may be as unlucky as February. Anyway, Julius Caesar set up a calendar. All right. Oh, you notice in your book that word dictator is in really bold print. And again, you want to look at the bold print stuff. But he was made dictator for life. All right, I emphasize him somewhat more than the book does. Now, something that used to be included in this book in the earlier versions, I talked from several years ago, that somehow your authors took out. I'm going to tell the story. Julius Caesar went to the Roman Senate one day, like all other days, he thought, but he met this blind soothsayer, a blind fortune teller, you might say, and this fortune teller said to him, "You're going to die on the Ides of March." Which is March the 15th. Now, there's nothing, if you look up the Ides of March, the only thing significant about it is Julius Caesar died on that date. Anyway, the soothsayer foretold it. Julius Caesar ignored it. Julius Caesar felt confident of his power. So, on the Ides of March, he went to the Senate, and there on the wayside was the soothsayer who had met before. And he laughed and said, "Hey, it's the Ides of March, and I'm still here." The soothsayer said, "The Ides of March are not over with yet." Julius Caesar marched into the Senate chamber, unaware that more than 20 men had been getting together and plotting his death. 20 or so senators. They put daggers under their cloaks, and from that we get the term cloak and dagger. They put daggers in the cloak, and they all had an agreement. They said, "Now, you 5 of us, we'll get in front, whichever way he's facing, 5 of us work your way to the front of him. And then you 5 over here, you work your way behind him. And you 5 here, you work your way on his right hand, you work your way on his left. What we do is we just casually act like nothing out of the ordinary is going. We just simply mill around and talk. Don't even have to talk to each other. Can talk to anybody, even the person who's not part of the plot. But each of us make sure you know your assigned area and get to it." So they all began milling around before the Senate started meeting. Julius Caesar was nonchalant, and unconcerned, unaware that more than 20 assassins were surrounding him. Then at a given signal by the leader, they all pulled their daggers out of their cloaks and lunged at Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar's horrified friends could do nothing for him. I mean, they figured, hey, they're after him and not us, but otherwise they'll kill us too. They could do nothing for him. Julius Caesar tried to defend himself, but he looked up as he was being stabbed and saw Brutus, who he thought was his friend, and he said, "Et tu, Brute," which means "you too, Brutus." And then more than 40 knife wounds took his life away. Apparently some of the assassins stabbed him more than once. He was killed.